What if the only person who could save your people was the one person legally forbidden to speak? And what if the place that finally made you safe, the room with the guards, the gold, the food that never runs out, turned out to be the room built to keep you quiet? Most of us know that room. It might be a job, a marriage, a friendship, a city where nobody knows what you came from. You get inside, you stop being hungry, and slowly you learn the price of staying. Don't mention where you're from. Don't make it awkward. Don't be the one who ruins dinner. And then one day, something happens outside that room to people you love, and you realize the door only opens from the other side. This is a true story from about 2,500 years ago, set in an empire that stretched from the edge of India to the deserts of Africa. There is a king who signs papers he does not read. There is a man who cannot forgive a bow he never received. There is a law that cannot be canceled, not even by the man who wrote it. And there is a young woman, an orphan, a refugee's daughter, living under a name that is not the one her mother gave her, who will have to walk down a corridor she is not allowed to walk down, toward a man who can have her killed for arriving. Her name is Esther. To understand what happens to her, you have to understand what happened to her grandparents. Her people were Jews, the descendants of Israel, a small nation that once had its own land, its own capital city called Jerusalem, and a temple there where they worshipped one God. About 100 years before this story, an empire called Babylon smashed that city, burned that temple, and marched the survivors east in chains. Not everyone. The poor were left in the rubble. The useful were taken, the craftsmen, the scribes, the young. They walked for months. Some of them died on the road, and their families kept walking. Then Babylon itself fell to the Persians, and a Persian king named Cyrus did something unusual. He told the exiles they could go home and rebuild. Some went. Most didn't. Think about that honestly before you judge them. By then, they had been away for 2 generations. Home was a word their grandparents used. They had houses here, trades here, graves here. Going home meant walking 1,000 miles to a bombed-out hill town to farm rocks. So they stayed, scattered across 127 provinces, paying their taxes in silver and grain, speaking Persian in the market and Hebrew at home, keeping quiet about the difference. Esther's family stayed. Her parents died. The text does not say how, only that she had neither father nor mother. And she was raised by an older cousin named Mordecai, who took her into his house and brought her up as his own daughter. Her real name was Hadassah, which means myrtle, a small green shrub with white flowers that grows where nothing else will, and that fills a whole courtyard with scent when you crush a single leaf between your fingers. Somewhere along the way, she started using another name, a Persian one, the kind that doesn't get you asked questions. Esther. It sounds like their word for star. In her own language, it sounds like the word for hidden. Now picture the city she grew up in, Susa, the winter palace of the Persian kings, built on a plain that turns to white dust in summer. Glazed brick walls the color of lapis and blood, with rows of molded lions walking along them at eye height. Pillars carrying carved bulls' heads, water brought in by canal. In the 3rd year of the reign of a king the Greeks called Xerxes, He threw a party for the nobles and army officers of every province, and it went on for 180 days. Half a year of showing them what he owned. Then a final week in the palace garden, open to everyone in the city, rich and poor. White cotton curtains and violet cords hung on silver rings. Couches of gold and silver on a floor of colored stone. Wine served in cups where no two cups matched, so that you were reminded every time you drank that this man had so much he never had to repeat himself. And at the head of it all, on the throne, the king's right hand resting on a long rod of gold. That rod is the thing to watch. Everything in this story eventually runs through it. In Persian court law, life and death traveled down that piece of metal. Remember it. On the seventh day, warm with wine, the king sent for his queen Vashti to come out and be looked at by the men. She refused. We are never told why, and you can invent your own reason. Any of them would be enough. The king's advisors panicked, not about his marriage, about the precedent. If the queen can say no in front of the officials of 127 provinces, then tonight every wife in the empire hears about it. So they wrote it into law. Vashti was finished, and the decree went out by courier in every language of the empire. Then Xerxes went to war with Greece and lost. A huge fleet, a huge army, and he came back 4 years later with less of both. Kings who lose wars need something to hold. His servants suggested a search. Bring the most beautiful young women in the empire to the palace and let the king choose a new queen. That sounds like a fairy tale until you notice the verb. They were gathered. Officers went through the provinces collecting girls the way they collected taxes. No one asked their fathers. And Esther, orphan, foreigner, a girl who had learned young to take up as little room as possible, was taken into the king's house. If this story has already got hold of you, take 1 second to subscribe. It genuinely helps these films reach the people who need them. Then stay with me, because the hard part is next. She was put under the care of a palace official named Hegai, and she pleased him, and he moved her to the best rooms and gave her 7 attendants and the best of everything. Before any of these young women saw the king, they went through 12 months of preparation. 6 months soaked in oil of myrrh, 6 months in perfumes and cosmetics, 12 months of being scrubbed, oiled, painted, and taught how to walk. Smell it. Resin and crushed almond, sweet enough to sit at the back of your throat, and underneath it, the flat metal smell of the bath water. A year of your life spent becoming an object that a man might want to keep. And through all of it, one instruction given to her by Mordecai before she went in. Say nothing about your people, nothing about your family. So she ate what was put in front of her and didn't explain what she would not eat. She learned to hear her people insulted in a corridor and keep her face still. Every day, Mordecai walked up and down in front of the courtyard of the women's house to find out how she was. An older man pacing a wall, asking servants for scraps of news about a girl he raised. The king took her and loved her more than all the others, and set the royal crown on her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. He threw a banquet in her honor and canceled taxes across the provinces and handed out gifts with a generous hand. From the outside, it is the happiest ending imaginable. The orphan is now the queen. From the inside, She is a foreigner sleeping in a palace, wearing a crown on a name that is not hers, in a marriage she did not choose, to a man she has to be summoned to see. And here is the detail that changes everything. Even the queen couldn't walk into the king's presence uninvited.
Anyone, man, woman, official, wife, who entered the inner court without being called was put to death.
There was one exception. If the king held out his golden scepter, you lived. If his hand stayed still, the guards took you out. One rod of gold between a person and the end of their life. She was the most protected woman in the world, and she could not walk into her own husband's room. The first crack came from a corridor. Mordecai, sitting at the king's gate, the gate was not just a door, it was where officials worked and legal business was done, so this tells us he had some minor government post, overheard two of the king's doorkeepers plotting to kill him. He got word to Esther. Esther told the king in Mordecai's name. The plot was investigated, the two men were executed, and the whole thing was written into the royal record book. And then nothing. No reward, no thank you. The scribe wrote it down and the palace moved on. Remember that too.
Because the palace was moving on to somebody else.
The king promoted a man named Haman and set his seat above all the other officials and commanded that everyone at the king's gate bow down to him. It is easy to make Haman a monster and be done with him. Try something harder. Try seeing him. He was, we are told, an Agagite, descended from Agag, king of the Amalekites. The Amalekites were the first people to attack Israel after they came out of slavery in Egypt, and they did it the way you would if you wanted to break a nation's heart. They hit the back of the column, where the exhausted and the sick and the children were dragging behind. Centuries later, Israel's first king, Saul, was sent to end them, and he half did it and kept Agag alive, and a prophet finished the job with a sword. Now here is Haman walking through a Persian palace with the name of an exterminated people in his family line. And here is Mordecai, who the text pointedly tells us is a Benjaminite, a son of Kish, the same tribe, the same family line as King Saul. Two men, two long memories, standing in a doorway. Everybody bowed. Mordecai didn't. Every single day they told him to, and every single day he stayed on his feet. And the reason he finally gave was not a theological argument. He simply told them he was a Jew. Notice what that costs. Esther's in the palace hiding what she is. Mordecai is at the gate announcing it. And you cannot cleanly say which of them is right. He may have been standing on holy ground. He may have been an old man who could not make his knees bend for that particular face. The text lets both be true. Haman didn't even notice at first. Someone had to point it out. And when he turned and looked and saw one gray-haired clerk still upright in a courtyard of bent backs, something in him came apart. He had climbed his entire life. He had almost everything. And the almost was standing right there, refusing to complete him. He was filled with fury. And then he did the thing that separates a wounded man from a dangerous one. He decided that killing Mordecai alone was beneath him. He would kill everyone like him. So in the first month of the 12th year of the king's reign, they cast lots in front of Haman to choose the day. The word for that lot in Persian is pur, dice, essentially, thrown to let fate pick. And fate picked the 13th day of the 12th month, 11 months away. Haman took it as a good omen. He should have looked closer. The dice had just handed his victims almost a year. Then he went to the king with a speech so smooth you can feel where it was rehearsed.
There is a certain people scattered and spread out among the peoples in all the provinces of your kingdom, he said. And their laws are different from every other people's, and they do not keep the king's laws, so it is not in the king's interest to tolerate them. Read that again, because it is the oldest speech in the world. He never names them. They are a certain people. They are everywhere. They are separate. They are disloyal. And they are a line item. If it pleases the king, he added, let it be written that they be destroyed, and I will pay 10,000 talents of silver into the royal treasury. That is roughly 300 tons of silver, a sum close to the annual income of the entire empire. He was offering to buy a nation and pay cash. The king took the signet ring off his own finger and gave it to Haman. Keep your money, he said. Do with the people as you please. Understand what that ring was. It was not jewelry. Pressed into hot wax, it made a document law. Handing it over was handing over the state, and the king did it without asking one question. Not who they are, not how many, not what they've done. This is what evil usually needs, not a monster on a throne, a bored man who signs. The scribes were called on the 13th of the first month. Couriers rode out to every province, in every script and every language. On a single day, the 13th of the 12th month, kill all Jews, young and old, women and children, and take their property as plunder. Copies were posted publicly so everyone could be ready. Then the king and Haman sat down to drink, and out in the streets, the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. 11 months' notice. That is the cruelest part. Every family in the empire now had to get up each morning and count. Buy grain for a year you may not see. Watch your neighbor, who has always been decent, working out what will be his when it's over. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on rough sackcloth, poured ashes on his head, went out into the middle of the city and cried out with a loud and bitter cry. He walked to the king's gate and stopped because no one dressed in sackcloth could pass through it. He had spent years pacing that wall for news of her. Now he stood outside it, filthy, wailing so that she would have to hear. She heard secondhand from her maids, and she was in anguish, and her first response was to send him clothes. Put these on, please. Take that off in public. It is such a human reflex that it hurts. Make the grief presentable. Make it go back inside. He refused them. So she sent a servant, Hathach, and Mordecai gave him everything. The exact sum of silver Haman had promised, and a copy of the written decree and instructions to show it to her and tell her to go to the king and beg for her people. And Esther said no. Not cruelly, practically.
Oh, that's bad.
She sent back the one fact everybody in that palace knew. All the king's servants and all the people of the provinces know that if any man or woman goes to the king in the inner court without being called, there is one law: put them to death. Unless the king holds out the golden scepter. And then, quietly, the sentence underneath the sentence: I have not been called to come into the king these 30 days. 30 days. She was not merely afraid of the law. She was afraid of the truth about her marriage. She had a crown and no access. She had been valuable once and did not know if she still was. To walk down that corridor was to find out in front of witnesses exactly what she was worth to him. And the answer would be delivered by a hand either lifting or not lifting a rod of gold. Mordecai's reply is the hinge of the whole story, and there is no comfort in it. "Do not imagine," he said, "that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape.
For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from somewhere else. But you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this?" Hear what he is actually saying. He is not saying she is the hero. He is saying the opposite. Rescue is coming, with or without you. The only thing in question is whether you will be part of it, or whether you will hide in a beautiful room until the door is kicked in. Your position will not save you. It was never a hiding place. It might, possibly, be an assignment. And who knows? He does not even promise her that God arranged it. He offers her a maybe and asks her to stake her life on it. That is what most of us are actually given. She was silent for a while. Then she sent back her answer, and it is the moment the orphan becomes the queen. "Go, gather all the Jews in Susa, and fast for me. Don't eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. My maids and I will fast the same way. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." Fasting in her world was what you did when words ran out. You stopped eating as a way of saying with your whole body that you were not in control and needed help. She names no God in that message. The book of Esther never names God once, not in a single line. He is the one presence nobody mentions and everyone is leaning on. Sometimes that is exactly what faith looks like from the inside. No voice, no sign, 3 days of an empty stomach, and then you get up and go anyway. 3 days later, she took off the sackcloth and put on her royal robes. Picture it properly, because the animation of this moment writes itself. The heavy oiled linen, the weight of the crown pressing on a skull that has not eaten in 72 hours. Her hands cold. The long inner court, the tiled floor, guards at intervals along the wall who all know the law and are all watching a woman break it. Her own footsteps, too loud. She stood in the inner court facing the throne room, and the king looked up and saw the queen standing there, and he held out the golden scepter. She crossed the floor and touched the tip of it, and the room started breathing again. "What is it, Queen Esther?" he said. "What is your request?" "Even to half of my kingdom it will be given to you." She did not ask. That is the strangest and smartest beat in the story. She had one sentence of pure favor available, and she spent it on an invitation to dinner. The king and Haman tonight. And at dinner, asked again, she asked them both back for a second dinner tomorrow. Was it strategy, letting Haman climb one more rung so the fall would be fatal? Was it terror, a woman who could not get the words out and bought herself a day? Both. It is always both. Haman went home that night floating. He had dined alone with the king and queen and been invited back. Then he passed the gate, and Mordecai did not stand up or tremble. And Haman went home and told his wife and friends about all his wealth and his sons and his promotion, and then said the line that gives him away completely. "Yet all this is worth nothing to me as long as I see that Jew sitting at the king's gate." Everything, and one man's spine ruins it. His wife Zeresh suggested a solution. Build a pole 75 feet high, get permission in the morning, hang Mordecai on it, and go to dinner happy. The idea pleased him, and he had it built that night. 75 feet, taller than the palace roof, so that it would be visible from every street in Susa. That night the king could not sleep. No angel, no dream, just a man lying awake. He called for the book of records to be read aloud to him, the driest thing in the building, and the reader happened to read the page where Mordecai the Jew exposed a plot to assassinate the king. "What honor has been given him for this?" the king asked. "Nothing," they said. "Who's in the court?" said the king. And Haman had just walked in at dawn to ask for permission to hang a man. "Bring him in." The king asked him a question. "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" And Haman thought, the text says it out loud, and it is the funniest and saddest sentence in the book. "Whom would the king delight to honor more than me?" So he designed his own dream. Royal robes the king has worn, a horse the king has ridden with a royal crown on its head. And let one of the highest officials lead that man through the city square, calling out ahead of him. "Hurry," said the king. "Take the robe and the horse and do exactly as you have said for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Leave nothing out." So Haman spent that morning walking on foot through the streets of Susa, leading a horse carrying the one man he could not forgive, shouting praise for him until his voice went, past the shadow of the pole he had built the night before. Then he went home with his head covered, and his wife, who had suggested the pole, looked at him and said what everyone in that room already knew, that this was a fall he would not get up from. While she was still speaking, the king's servants arrived to hurry him to the queen's banquet. Second night, wine again, and the king asked for the third time, "What is your petition, Queen Esther? It will be granted even to half of my kingdom." "If I have found favor in your sight, O king," she said, "and if it pleases the king, let my life be given me. That is my petition, and my people. That is my request. For we have been sold, I and my people, to be destroyed, to be killed, to be wiped out." 4 years of silence ended in one sentence: "My people." She did not argue policy. She stood inside the sentence of death and pointed at herself first. The king did not even know what she was talking about. "Who is he?" he said. "Where is he? The man who dared to do this?" She said, "A foe and an enemy, this wicked Haman." Haman was terrified before the king and queen. And the king got up and walked out into the palace garden because he had just understood that he signed it. He gave the ring. He numerasked. He drank while the city fell apart. And when he came back in, Haman had thrown himself onto the couch where Esther was reclining, begging her for his life. And the king saw a man on his wife's couch, and that was the end of the argument. A servant named Harbona mentioned, helpfully, that there was a 75-foot pole standing in Haman's own yard, built for the man who saved the king's life.
"Hang him on that," said the king. So they did, and the king's anger cooled, but the law was still alive. That is the part people forget. Haman was dead, and the decree was still riding around the empire, sealed with the king's own ring, and under Persian law, a decree written in the king's name and sealed with his ring could not be revoked, not even by him. A dead man's hatred had been made permanent. So Esther went back again. She fell at the king's feet and wept and begged him to stop the evil Haman had planned. And the king held out the golden scepter to her a second time, and she stood up. They could not cancel the law. So they wrote another one on top of it. Mordecai, now wearing the ring that had been Haman's, dictated it. On that same day, the Jews in every city had the right to gather and defend themselves and their wives and their children.
Couriers went out on the fastest horses from the royal stables, riding hard. And this time, when the decree was posted in Susa, the city shouted and was glad. Mordecai walked out of the palace gate in blue and white, with a large gold crown and a robe of fine linen and purple. And for the Jews, there was light and gladness and joy and honor. On the 13th day of the 12th month, the day the dice had chosen, the day their enemies had been waiting 11 months for, they stood and fought and were not destroyed. And 3 times the record insists on one detail. They did not touch the plunder, not a coin. The original decree had promised looters a payday. They refused the money. They wanted to be alive, not enriched. Afterwards, they made those days a festival called Purim, named after the dice, the throw that was meant to pick their death day, kept forever as their party.
They fixed it as days of feasting and sending food to each other and giving gifts to the poor, so that nobody would remember the rescue alone. So what do you do with this, sitting where you are, in a life with no palaces in it? Start with the thing this book refuses to say. God is never mentioned, not once. No miracle, no burning bush, no voice. Just a king's insomnia, a lot cast by a proud man, a page in a record book nobody had read for 5 years, and a young woman deciding to walk down a corridor. If you are waiting for the sky to open before you will believe you are held, this book is written for you. It says that the rescue can be complete and the room can stay silent. Nothing in your life may look like an act of God until much later, when you turn around and see how the pieces fitted. Then take Mordecai's question, because it is aimed at you. Who knows whether you have come to this position for such a time as this? Not, you are special. Not, you were chosen because you are strong. Just, you are the one standing there. Your job, your family, your city, the room you got into that your parents never did, the language you happen to speak, the person who happens to trust you. These are not only rewards, they are places you have been put, and the warning underneath it is sharp. Do not think that because you are in the king's house you will escape. Comfort is not a hiding place. It is a temporary address. And then there is the scepter. Everything in this story runs through that rod of gold. A law that says the uninvited die. A woman with no legal right to be in that room. A long walk, 3 days of hunger,
and a hand that either lifts or does not. She had no claim. She went anyway, and it was extended. That is not a metaphor Christians invented later. It is the shape of the whole thing.
There is a throne room none of us has clearance for, and a law we have all broken, and the reasonable expectation of being turned away. And the entire message of Jesus is that the hand has already been extended. He is the one who went in on our behalf, not risking death, but accepting it, so that the guards would never come. "If I perish, I perish," said Esther. He said something similar in a garden at night, sweating, and then he went. That is why the invitation reads the way it does. Come to the throne with confidence and find mercy and grace right when you need it. So here is the honest question this story leaves in the room. What is the corridor you have not walked down? The conversation you are not having? The truth about yourself you have never said out loud? The people you belong to that you have quietly stopped mentioning because it is easier in that job, that group, that family? You know the one. It has been sitting in your chest through this entire film. You may not feel brave. Esther wasn't. She was an orphan who had been taken, renamed, and taught to be pleasant. She said no first. She stalled for a day. She was terrified all the way to the throne. Courage is not the absence of that. Courage is putting on the robes with shaking hands and going anyway, 3 days empty with nothing to hold but a maybe. The scepter is already out. Get up. If this reached you today, subscribe and stay with us. There are more of these stories to tell, and someone you know needs to hear this one. Whatever room you're standing outside of tonight, go in.